Hey, funny arguments that you've ever heard of or even had yourself.
All right, Mr. Sullivan. He's already thinking about the icebreaker, which is awesome. You're getting ahead. Oh, and look, he's reminded me we're not lit up. Is that better? Yes, all right. Tonight, Chris Sullivan and Marcy Sullivan are here to talk to you about SYMBIS. That stands for Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. SYMBIS is an amazing tool. It's an online resource you can take, and you'll get an assessment with lots of pages in your report. I think there's something like 18 in here. We'll cover many different things, and one of them being our topic for tonight, which is conflict. What conflict style do you have? What are your hot topics? We're going to talk about conflict. We're going to tell you different strategies to make things a little bit smoother, and we hope you really enjoy it. So that is our topic for tonight. Now, hopefully you've had time to think about your crazy arguments. Now take it
Yeah,
away, Chris.
so our question for tonight, our icebreaker is what is the craziest or funniest argument you've ever heard of or even had yourself? Um, so I guess while we're seeing if anybody responds to that, um, one of the funniest arguments I ever heard, we're sitting in the barbershop one day, and in a barbershop that's mostly seasoned adults come in, seasoned guys come in, and in this case, all three of them are there. One sitting each. There was two barbers, somebody sitting in each chair, and then a guy comes in, and everybody had hearing aids. The guys in the chairs didn't have theirs in, and the guy who came in, he was saying very loudly, "Hey, these young people today don't understand. They can't even flush the toilet without electronics." And one guy responds, "What? You don't need electronics to flush the toilet?" And the other guy is saying, "Oh, I can flush toilets by myself." And they're having three different conversations, arguing with each other very loudly. And the only thing the other barber and I could do was we had to stop and laugh very hard because it was just hilarious hearing all these guys arguing with each other all about something about toilets from their perspective. It was hilarious.
I guess you'd have to be
You
there.
had to be there. It's a location joke, that's for sure. But it was very funny.
Uh,
So whenever you see this posting, post down something that was funny for you, or something that you heard. It could be quite encouraging, probably.
right. It could be
So
something you observed. It could be something from your own life.
that's right.
All
That's right.
right.
Well, one thing I wanted to encourage, since today is about conflict, could be an argument, could be, I don't know, something like that. But, I wanted to point out we are definitely, if you haven't figured this out yet, we definitely approach marriage, all of life, with a Christian mindset. And you always hear a example of a triangle where each spouse is at the bottom corner and God is at the top, and we're reaching for that. If we're all traveling toward God, we're going to get closer together, and that's true. A lot of people get they struggle with that horizontal relationship between each other. And I heard somebody say it's like tug of war. You're never going to meet each other.
Yeah. Cool.
You're just pulling your own way, pulling my way. It's never toward each other. And the only way to truly get to each other is to get to know Christ. And that needs to be the one single thing, is my relationship with Christ. Marcy focuses on her relationship with Christ, and we'll get up there together. We'll draw closer together, and as we draw closer to Christ, we have to. I was just reading a little bit about facing temptation and things like that, which this whole chapter I was reading was talking about, was very comparable to the subject of conflict tonight. It was talking about how we need to be humble, and we need to take those things captive that are tempting us, and we need to be able to get God's help on it. And we have to be humble with that. And then we have to have patience. And that's the same thing with conflict here at the overall thing. First of all, focus on our vertical relationship with God and then our spouse. And having that be humble and being patient, knowing that patience is coming because we're going through this conflict.
Right. Very good. Yes, Chris has got some extra insights that the Lord has been teaching him that he'll be throwing in there as we go along. All right. We are talking about conflict, and one of the things we need to understand is the truth about buried feelings. Sometimes we are in a hurry and we don't get to say something that we meant to say. Could be a good thing, like, hey, you look great today. But things just happen and we forget. Could be something that's been annoying us for quite some time, like, oh my goodness, I wish you would put your shoes away. Whatever the thing is. Those unsaid things are called withholds. And these negative feelings, if they're left buried, have a high rate of resurrection. So you might think they're beneath the surface, but they're going to come back up. They're always going to come back up. So a positive way that we have learned to work on these withholds is, well, we have two ways actually. We're going to tell you one that is called sharing withholds, okay? And that is where you each write down 3 things. Do this once a week. We like to do our thing on Sundays when we do it, but share 3 things. Write it on paper first. You're going to write something positive you'd forgotten to say, like the how wonderful you looked the other night, or whatever that is. Something negative, something that's been annoying you. And then the third thing, another positive. So 1 positive, 1 negative, 1 positive. You share yours, and after each comment, I did forget to mention this, after I say, Chris, you looked really great the other day, Chris would say,
thank you.
That's all he has to say. Even with the negative. If I said, Chris, it really annoyed me when you didn't pick up your shoes, he would still say,
thank you.
See how wonderful that is? And then the last one, I just love how you handled the towing situation with our daughter today and getting all of that worked out.
Thank you.
See how nice that works? Now, the other thing you've got to remember is that you do not mention the negative again for at least 30 minutes. So if he was really offended about what I said about the shoes, he's not going to just start in on me with the next thing. He would share his positive, his negative, his positive, stick to his list, and then we let 30 minutes go by. That gives us a chance to go from the reacting part of our brain to the more thoughtful responding part of our brain. And we may not even feel like we need to talk about it after we've had that 30 minutes to calm down. Now, the second way that we're going to teach you to work on these withholds is something we call the weekly check-in.
Weekly check-in. So some good questions to ask each other. And if you want to, you can even keep track of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really helpful. It makes it, for those who like to write and keep track of things. The first question you can say is, what brought you joy this week?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Second one was, what was something that was hard this week? What's one specific thing I can do for you this week?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I pray for you this week? Is there anything that's gone unsaid? Convictions, confessions, unresolved hurt? And the last question, what's a dream, desire, or thought that's been on the forefront of your mind this week?
Yes, now if you would be interested in having your own copy of that, you can message me in the bottom, weekly check-in. Put that in the comments, and then I will respond to you and get that sent out to you. So if you'd like the weekly check-in questions, just drop in weekly check-in on the comments.
One of the Great quotes that has hit me ever since we saw this series and started teaching it is this. So Dr. Les Parrott says, conflict is the price we pay for a deeper level of intimacy. Let me say that again. Conflict is the price we pay for a deeper level of intimacy. Uh, we have to, you're not going to have conflict when you're all by yourself. If you involve another person in your life to get to know them better, to have a deeper friendship of any kind, you're going to have some conflict. We're going to have to face that. That's very important. That's very important. I did not understand that, and Marcy and I we had a miscommunication one day, and I was just meditating on this about conflict being the key and the price I pay, and I realized, wait a minute, the only way I'm going to have to go through some pain, some uncomfortableness, but we're on the same team, so it's all good. It's all good, even the conflict. It may not feel like it's good, but it's all good. And that day, something was said. I'm like, oh boy. But I didn't get negative. God was working me on how to retrain my thoughts. Mm. And my thought was immediately, oh boy, how deeper am I get to know Marcy? Mm-hmm. It totally surprised me at the time. But for me, I took it deeper in a spiritual aspect. And I just very briefly, to me, is the same as, Jesus said how we get to know him better, and it's through his suffering. And we got to learn, we got to suffer to be more like Jesus. And to know my wife better, I want to have conflict with her, and I have to know her, be able to know her better. So to me, that was very nice.
Right?
Kind of, at the time.
So as we've been preparing for this, I had to joke with Chris, we're going to get plenty of chances to practice this next week. It usually happens that way.
Matt, that is a warning for anybody who's wanting to teach things. That's what usually happens.
Right. All right. Now we're going to talk about 4 conflict killers. These come from Dr. John Gottman. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He is highly quoted throughout all different marriage resources that I have seen. And he has something called the Marriage Lab, where he would invite volunteers, couples, to come in and spend the day in his marriage lab, basically a studio apartment. They were hooked up with all different types of sensors to measure their heartbeat and their breathing and even their perspiration, all of these different things. And what he found out was he could predict divorce in these couples in about a 90, I'm not going to say 99% accuracy, but it was up there. And here are the things that he noticed that the couples that usually divorced ended up doing quite a bit of. The first one is criticism. Now, criticism is when you're attacking the person, not the behavior. So if you were to say something negative about the character of that person, like you are lazy, that's a criticism. You don't want to get into that. Whenever you say you always do this or you never do that, accusations, attacking, okay? Let's cut those out. The next one is defensiveness, which might be a natural response to criticism. If I'm criticizing Chris, he's going to want to defend himself. That's very natural. But self-protection blocks our empathy. So we want to be careful not to do that. In fact, defensiveness tends to escalate things because then the other person feels like they have to prove their point, and back and forth it goes. Now, contempt. This is the worst one, actually. Contempt is disrespect, sarcasm, eye-rolling, and it was the biggest predictor of divorce when you get into contempt. So avoid that at all costs. And then stonewalling. I think this is generally something that a lot of men will do. maybe because they don't know what to say. They don't want to get themselves in any more trouble, or maybe they're just hurt and they need to retreat. But stonewalling is withdrawing or shutting down emotionally. I've heard of lots of couples where they have what they call the silent or the cold wars, and it's just nobody speaks to each other. This is stonewalling. Now, if you have been guilty of some of these things, don't despair. It's as long as it's not habitual with you. If you know some ways that you can kind of break that cycle, you can get out of those habits, and we're going to give you a few to work on. So the first one is the conflict card. Now, we don't have our example with us, but basically, and you don't really need the card, if you can just picture in your mind a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is something that, I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me one way or another. I'm not really invested in this. And then 10 being the extreme, I would die over this. This means so much to me. So when you're having a conflict, and a lot of times usually the woman, is much more expressive than the man, it is a good idea to take out that little scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about that, Chris? If Chris is at a 7 or 8, and I'm more at a 3 or a 4, maybe I can defer to him on that choice. And it goes vice versa. Because you got to think about it. Choose your battles. You've ever heard that before?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you want you got to choose your battles. What are the things that are really important to you? And the things that are not, then you can defer to your spouse. And that's really cooperating with one another, isn't
And
it?
it's not really a battle either.
No.
We're on the same team.
Right. Yes. Just an expression.
Yeah.
All right, so the next part that we're going to teach you about is called the...
Oh, well, let me say that conflict card
thank
is
you.
available on it says lesandleslie.com.
Yes.
You can get the download.
Free download, lesandleslie.com. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing is the XYZ formula. That's a tool for conflict. And so in this example, this is the sentence you need to use. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. So X, Y, Z. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. And this helps reframe the criticism into a healthy complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so an example of that, here's an example, real life thing that we did. And I said, Marcy, did you know that the other night when we went on our date, when you asked so many questions, one after the other, it made me feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. So yes, you get the situation was on the date.
Yeah.
When I did what? I asked way too many questions, which I always like to try to milk as much of a connection as I can out of something. But it overwhelmed him. Okay, that makes sense, right? So when you do, I feel, or okay, in this situation, when you do, I feel, right?
Yeah.
We want to talk about, again, the SYMBIS, because there's actually a whole section on your hot topics. What are your hot topics? What sort of things are you likely to have conflicts over? And it might surprise you.
Yeah.
So it gives you 5 categories each and rates them from top. And I'll just tell you, our top 2, according to the report, was priorities for me and chores for Chris. So, and those may shift over time as you learn to talk about things more, but this would be a really great resource for you. And as we've said before, you can take the SYMBIS assessment online, and then Chris and I will be happy to walk you through it. So just drop SYMBIS, SYMBIS, in the comments below if you'd like more information about that.
And again, remember, this is not just a tool just for when you're just starting out in your marriage, although that's awesome way to start off like we did,
Mm-hmm.
but also to if you're already married for no matter how many years, this is an awesome way to re-engage and revitalize your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to ask some questions now. Hope this gives you a chance to reflect a little bit on what we've been talking about tonight. And what causes the biggest conflicts in your relationship?
Well, we
Yeah, we
mentioned
just mentioned ours.
and do the
Chores,
top two, chores and
chores
priorities.
and priorities for us. Yep. And so, what is it for you? A lot of people, the major number one thing usually is money,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where like this assessment it actually goes into uh, how you were raised thinking about money,
Mm-hmm.
and how what your expectations were and are, and then maybe even what it is now,
Mm-hmm.
so you could help address those things. For example, if you're a saver or a spender,
Right.
that's the basics of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you usually handle conflict when it arises?
Okay. Well, I will speak for myself, and that is I generally avoid it until it gets too much. Like we were talking about earlier, and that's why it's so important to have those opportunities when it's a period of non conflict to be able to talk about those things, those withholds or the weekly check in.
Yeah.
If you have that on a regular basis, then you're not avoiding the conversations that you need to have until they get so big that you can't hold them in.
That's right. For me, I probably hold it in until and it goes. This goes to the next question: how did your family handle conflict when you were growing up? And for me, it was like, if you have a complaint, you need to have a solution when you come to it. So that's I usually hold it in until it bothers me enough for me to think about a solution or to contribute something productive to the situation, and not just be a complainer. At least that's the idea. I may not always hit that mark, but that's the idea.
Made me think of something just now when Chris was talking about complaints. And I heard one time that a complaint is really a lazy desire.
Mm.
We want something, but we don't know how to express it, so we complain. One great example of that would be, I'm so hot.
Yeah.
That's a complaint. I would love to cool off. That's a desire. And it's much more inspiring to someone like, oh, well, would you like a cold drink? Would you want to step inside? How about we take a swim? You know, there's solutions for things when we express a desire instead of just complaining. So there's another bonus point for you, a bonus tip.
That's true. But this third question. So how does um, so we definitely get some of the baggage we bring into our marriage is how our families handled conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's one thing that you really need to be aware of,
Mm-hmm.
and that really helps be able to talk about it.
Right.
And unfortunately, I mean, it's great if you do it, but find out some of these things before you get married.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you may be married for a while and you still don't have never figured this out. So these are some good questions
Mm-hmm.
to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to say too. We talked about the different conflict, and I don't think we really said this. Oh, like this, we talked about the weekly check-in, and we talked about the conflict card. Um, but it's really important to do these things in a time of non-conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we really, if I expressed it that way, but like do it at a time where it's not in the middle of you're all heated and mad and angry,
Mm-hmm.
and it's time. You know what? We need to think about this for a moment. That's why important that 30-minute wait in between the different
The negative.
on the negative
Mm-hmm.
withholds, that you wait that time to cool off, where it's a time of non-conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so here's the last question: what habits, good or bad, have you brought into your marriage from those things that how your family handled it? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess we kind of addressed that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. A little bit, yeah. In my situation, my mom was much more vocal than my dad, and so he would tend to avoid, which I think I kind of adopted his to a point. I never saw him blow up at all, so I don't know how he handled it. But but my mom was very, very vocal, and when she got started, you just, if you weren't the person that upset her, but you might, if you were in her path, she'd be, you'd be getting the brunt of it. So I would avoid. I would just go in my room and stay away. Um, week is our next class is our last one for this, and it will be at Monday at 7 p.m. again. Also, it is the final class in the series. If you'd like to do more of these lives, please let us know. We'd really love to have some audience participation. So please remember to take the SYMBIS assessment with us. You can go to marcysullivan.com and find out information about that. Contact me via email. And just remember that it is better to understand your relationship dynamics and grow stronger through a powerful tool like SYMBIS. So thank you all for being here. Good night.
Take care, guys.